Yeah, I think for me, I always tell people to just do it, you know. I think the fear should never hold them back at all. It's just so life-changing, these things. But I do, if I talk to people and they say, you know, I'm really scared. I can't sleep at night. I'm saying, you know, I do tell them, you know, get control of your fear and also your self-worth, you know. Realize that you are the authority of your life and there's nothing really that can touch that, to be honest with you. I mean, we don't die, you know, there's no end, you go on. And once you can really embody that, I think for people and really feel it in yourself, you know, that strength.
Good day, everyone, wherever you are. We're happy to have you here. We are the Awaken to Joy podcast, and today we have our first guest ever, and it's Jaime Dyson. She's here to share some of her experiences with us, some of her stories, dreams, lucid dreaming, meetings with guides, beings, and a whole load more. So welcome, Jaime. Hiya.
Hiya.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to be here.
Lovely. We're honored to have you. Is there anything that you would like to share about yourself? Who you are, where you come from, or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a mother of two middle school children, so very busy. I have a pretty straight-laced, kind of straightforward, I guess, life. But for the last, since the age of 29, I'm 44 now, I have been practicing lucid dreaming, out of body, and astral projection, so pretty regularly. Definitely a passion of mine. Love talking about it with anybody that would listen. So, yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited to talk more about it.
Wonderful. So, how did all of this first start for you? Are you somebody who went through this as a kid? Was this something that you were just like dipping your toe in when you were younger, or did it all start for you at 29? How did that work?
No, I think, yeah, from the first memory I have, I can always remember kind of looking around saying like, why is nobody talking about what we're missing here? You know, I would just kind of like be like, why aren't we all talking about this? You know, and just everybody's going about, I really had this sense that I was missing something. I had a strong sense that we had no memory from before we came here. And I didn't know why we didn't all talk about it. So that really was kind of the foundation of my life, is just this constant searching. I know I'm missing something. I know I'm missing something. And then my mother, actually, she really pushed me to keep track of my dreams every day. And I became very, very good at that. From the age of like maybe even 7 or 8, I was tracking dreams every night, or every morning. And it was weird because she didn't actually track them herself. So it's kind of like, okay. So that was the backdrop too. And I had a couple interesting dreams that sort of were a little bit premonition stuff, super interesting. I never really understood kind of what they meant, but I loved keeping track of them. I had a few hallucination kind of type experiences when I was little. But kind of just that was it. And then I just kept looking and looking and searching. And then basically at the age of 29, yeah, I was having just dinner with a friend of mine. And again, to anybody that would listen, I think, what are we missing? You know, tell me. And he's like, you know, have you ever heard of Dolores Cannon? And I said, no, I had never heard of her. And so it was kind of like, well, you should go look her up. And this was early in YouTube days. So I went home and just sort of binged all the content I could find about Dolores Cannon. Volunteers coming to the earth, helping people. And it just hit me like a brick. You know, it was like, whoa, this is something, this is important. I really, really resonated with everything she said. And I thought, finally, I'm getting somewhere. And that night, I just really was turned on. My brain was really turned on. And I went to bed. And I remember waking up in the middle of the night and kind of sitting up in bed. I mean, looking back, I'm not sure if my eyes were actually open or what, and then in the room, the vibrations were like throughout my body, just like a jet engine, like from boom, boom, boom. And it was incredibly scary. I was really, really, really scared. And I actually said like, I don't know what this is. Please make it stop, just sort of out loud. And it did. And much like in the future, something sort of put me back to sleep. And in the morning I thought, oh no, that happened. And I looked up online and it was like, oh, vibrations, sleep. And that was the opening to me, kind of starting.
Wonderful. I know that a lot of people experience those vibrations and they kind of shut it down, but they wouldn't investigate further because of the fear of it. What made you say, no, I'm going to look further?
Yeah, I mean, the fear is so, so important. I think for me, I did actually go back kind of tiptoeing a little bit, to be honest with you. I knew that I was onto something big. And I was actually at the same time sort of, and then you kind of get exposed to all these ideas. Like I had heard the term spirit guides, it was like, oh, wow. Like I didn't even really know what that meant, to be honest with you. I was just like, oh, that sounds interesting. So instead of sort of going full force, I did sort of tiptoe and I became a very, very good lucid dreamer. I was getting lucid probably like 2 or 3 times a week. Had it down pretty well. And, it was, it was actually, I think probably maybe even a few months after that first vibration experience that I had gotten lucid and I had asked to go to the ocean. I wanted to see the beach. But nothing had happened. Like I was just in this empty room and I thought, it's frustrating because you try so hard to get lucid. And when you get there and you can't do what you want, it can be very frustrating. So I just said, you know what? Let's just do this. Let's just see what happens. I knew that the spirit guide thing, I knew something was up with that. I didn't, and I thought, and my fear took a back seat at that moment. And I was holding a Starbucks cup. I'll never forget. And I actually used to work for Starbucks. So there's a lot of correlation with that. And I threw it against the wall and I just said, you know what? Let's do this. And I just started like really, really saying a mantra of strong. I want to meet my spirit guides. I want to meet my spirit guides. And I felt myself kind of rising up out of the bed in the fetal position. And so I'm kind of got my eyes closed and I can feel the vibrations really hitting. And all of a sudden there were 2 men there. And it was like, boom, like one of them's on my shoulders and one of them's on my ankles. And I just like, my heart was coming out of my chest. I couldn't believe that it was actually real. And I actually opened my eyes a little bit and I saw kind of the outline of a man. And he said to his partner, she's going to be okay. It's okay. Like he's telling me, it's okay. Just calm down. We're here. And, kind of back and forth. And I just was so incredibly overwhelmed. I said, I'm so sorry. Like, I cannot do this right now. I feel bad, but I can't. I was so scared. So I forced my eyes open in my bedroom. I just painfully, I know those of us that do this, it can feel so painful to get those eyes open. And yeah. I did. And in the room, there were like these 2 giant fireballs, orb kind of like things with tails of fire kind of flowing through the room. And they actually went out the window. And as they left the window, I kind of like blinked. And then it was just kind of over, but I was awake at that point. So that was my first jump off the into the fear.
That's a good one.
I thought I was the only ankle person out there, but I'm. Yeah, that overwhelmed me too. But I'm happy I'm not alone with that. So since that time, how has your relationship with them developed? Like now you've eased in, now you had experienced it once. Was it like, I gotta go and do that again? Was it like getting on like a roller coaster ride? It's like, okay, I'm scared, but that was good. Okay.
100%. Yeah.
Okay.
I think for a lot of people that might set them off. I would hope not, but I was certainly like sold. I was like, I can't believe this is real. It took me a while to kind of get my bearings, but I thought, this is the great adventure, that could be the great adventure of my life. And it certainly has been. So, yeah, I think for me personally, like having guides, working with the guides and talking to them and over there has been probably the most rewarding thing I've ever experienced in terms of just the experience itself is very exhilarating. So it can be very rewarding in that way. But also the information that they can send and give is just, it's phenomenal. The access that we have with them. So
absolutely, which leads me to my next question. What type of insights have they given you over the years? And I know that is a very loaded question, because you could just ask them about day-to-day life. They could have been giving this information to you for years, but what, like, globally would you say is your biggest takeaway from your relationship that you've built up with them over the years?
yeah, I think there's a lot of layers to that. I feel like for me, their contact with me, it depends on where we are. If I find myself in kind of a lucid state, they tend to appear like dream characters. So I will get lucid and say, I want to talk to my guides. I want to talk to my guides. And there's been so many times where I'm kind of in a room with a bunch of people, and then I say, okay, if you're a dream character, please go away. And then, everybody disappears, and then there's only like 5 or 6 people left, and they kind of stand up and go, here we are,
So that's a really good.
That's great.
Method. That's excellent.
Do they always appear to you with the same avatar, or have they changed? Have they shown themselves in their true form, or how's it been for you?
For me personally, they always look like people. In the beginning, they would usually kind of wear things that were symbolic for my importance for me. Like I remember one time they were all dressed like cheerleaders. Like I was like, okay. But I'd say most of the time, recalling content, it can be difficult too, but most of the time there's about 5 or 6 of them, and if I'm in a more lucid state, they're more kind of active, showing me symbols, talking to me. And the reason why I did the whole, dream characters go away is because for a long time, for years, I would get sidetracked by dream characters often. They would sort of take me somewhere and I'm like, wait a minute, how did I get here? And then I'd go, oh, geez, I'm following a dream character,
Yeah.
So I had to sort of isolate them. But yeah, but in more of a close state to the sleep state, more of a trance, I think, they definitely they look like people. There's always been 2 men. That's always kind of my standing. There's always these 2 men, specifically one man that I've worked with a number of times. And he's blonde and tall, and, very straightforward. But as for the other ones, it's about 5 or 6. There's been one woman that was there for a while. I talked to her a few times, and she was kind of an older woman. But yeah, there is some consistency, but there's also some kind of fluidity, I guess, in that way.
Understood. I was going to ask, do you have names that you call them or call them by, or you just call them the guides and then they know who they are? Have they shared that information with you? Or is it like, are you not interested? You just know that they're the guides and they're the guides.
Yeah, I think actually I've never thought about that, but it's interesting. It's definitely the latter. It's just like they're there, and I don't ever really think about that part of it. I guess they're always so eager to help, and I think I don't know, I would imagine a lot of people would think this kind of thing can be kind of airy-fairy, but they're very practical and grounded, just like talking to you now. They're very funny, kind of sarcastic in a way, to be honest. Yeah, so I never, I think I never really thought there has been a few times where I got a name specifically, and I worked with this woman for a few times. Yeah. But other than that, it's just kind of like, okay, we're here, game on, let's start working, let's start talking, let's get to work here.
So I've got a questions about working with your guides. Is it like what type of work is it? Is it for personal matters, or is it for other people? What are their missions, or what type of work is it really that you've done with them?
Yeah, I think primarily what I'm doing, at least consciously, is trying to find answers to my own life. I've asked a lot of questions. I've been told a number of times that I can't have the answer to certain questions. I've actually been in lucid dreams with them where I'm like, no, I really, really want to know this one thing. And then the credits will start rolling in front of my eyes, like at the end of a show. like, like, and then I'll just physically be kicked out, kind of like,
That's
but
lovely.
they've actually helped me with a lot of health issues. There's been a number of times where they've given me information about my health that has changed my life. And yeah, so I think that's a huge part of it for me, is kind of going in with these goals, setting that intention, meeting up with them and just being like, but then a lot of the other times are kind of, maybe I don't have a goal, or maybe I do. And they say, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to do this other thing. And a lot of the times I've actually, prior to coming to you, looked through my journal, and it's remarkable how many times I've been taken to a classroom, sitting down with somebody, seeing a projector in front of me, being told all these things about a different place, and then being taken to a different place and seeing, this is how we do things here, and so excited about showing me these different places. Different Earths, to be honest with you, is kind of the pattern that I saw. So yeah, there's a bit of that, and there is a bit of just kind of conversations. A lot of times I'll come back and think, wow, that was really fascinating. I recall only maybe 5 or 10% of it, but it usually has to do with the Earth and how this place is important, and we need you to understand all these things, kind of a thing. So it can be a little bit of a little bit of a variety.
Have you ever met up with beings that are not your guides? So outside of the classroom space, outside of your guides, have you ever met up with what people would consider extraterrestrials? I really don't really favor that word, because I'm just like, okay, but for lack of a better term, beings. Have you ever met up with beings that don't hold humanoid features, or would, people would seemingly be like, okay, so that's where your toes are, that type of thing?
Yeah, I'd have to say not really, honestly. Most of the time it is the guides. Most of the time they do, to me, appear like people. There's a small handful of times. I mean, I have met I have met with shadow beings. I've encountered them quite a few times. The fear that I don't like to talk about fear because it's really not that big of a deal, but and experience the fear that they can bring. Just sort of randomly, I'll be sitting up in bed, kind of a little bit out of body, and I'll just see one kind of just walk around, I have seen and experienced times with what I would call gray aliens. They kind of looked a little weird to me. It was more of like they didn't have the typical head. I think it was kind of a weird upper head situation. But that involved my mother and I. We spent the night at a hotel together one time, and she talks in her sleep. She's since passed on, but she talks in her sleep, and she is just very active. And so I was wide awake looking at her, thinking, what is going on with her in her dream state,
Yeah.
And so I thought, maybe I'll go check it out. And I went in, and her and I were in a hospital. And I said, Mom, what is going on with your dream state? This is just wild. You're all over the place. And she goes, oh, you just wait and see what I have to deal with. And so I kind of looked around this hospital thinking, okay, what's going to happen? And I felt intense fear, and I had to get away. And that's when I saw this kind of large head alien, and it was and when I came back, because I was so scared, to be honest with you, I opened my eyes a little bit, and in the room was just kind of like the X-Files, the lights flashing through the window. And I just thought, wow, this is okay. And I had to wake myself up even more to get out of there, and then I came back. It was dark, but that was one of my experiences where I thought, well, that's clearly an alien or an extraterrestrial, as you say.
It sounded like, from what you said, like your mum was like, in her dream state at least, was used to it. It was like,
Right.
business as usual. It's like, oh, you should see what I have to deal with. It's like, okay. So you did mention that she'd since passed on, and I know that a lot of people, their entrance into out-of-body states and all of this lucid dreaming and going into these states is triggered by a loss of a family member. How is your abilities to, roam around your dream states, out of body experiences, affected that side of your life? Have you been able to reach out to loved ones, or is that something that you kind of haven't felt the need to correlate together?
With my mother, I did. She visited me very early on, a number of times. We talked for hours one night in that state, which was great. I felt like I was given a gift of another day with her. And it was amazing. I just thought this is great. But I don't know if I would only be venturing to guess from my own experience that they don't stick around that long. In that beginning part, it felt like she kind of just moved on, and I never saw her again in my dream state. So
understood.
Yeah.
That is still very lovely, because I know that there's a lot of people who really do get into this through loss, and I know that even the gift of that, something like a conversation for an extra day, would mean a lot to them. So I do like to touch on that, because I'm aware about how some people enter into this whole entire subject. Spoke about these grey beings and being scared. Was it because it was something you weren't used to, or was it more flight or fight, or was it more just, I've never seen you before, like how you see a spider and you're like, oh my gosh? Was it that, or was it more the atmosphere that they were kind of emitting for you?
For me, I did get the sense that it was like the more that we would run away from them, so this kind of idea of resistance to them, the more that they would be drawn to us.
Understood.
Like this sense of, they sort of are, and again, this is just from my personal experience and from what I can gather from the 10-second experience, but for me it was like, the more I ran, the more that they would be able to like come. And so it was almost like this idea of like facing your fears. They feed off that kind of fear. I'm not saying they're all bad or anything. It's just what I experienced. And so for me, it was more of a lesson that, and I could see my mom had probably for years, I mean, for her own history of her life, been in a state of fear, to be honest with you. And I think that they kind of gravitate towards that, to be honest with you.
Okay. That's kind of what I wanted to know, because I know that conquering my own fears when it came to my own experiences was an integral part of how expanded my experiences can be. And I know that fear can be quite crippling in itself, especially when you go into these things. And it's not to say going blindly, but have you found that courage has been one of those tools that you're going to need to kind of just venture deeper as you've been kind of expanding into these experiences?
Yeah, I think for me, I always tell people to just do it. I think the fear should never hold them back at all. It's just so life-changing, these things. But I do, if I talk to people and they say, I'm really scared. I can't sleep at night. I'm saying, I do tell them, get control of your fear and also your self-worth. Realize that you are the authority of your life, and there's nothing really that can touch that, to be honest with you. I mean, we don't die, there's no end, you go on. And once you can really embody that, I think for people, and really feel it in yourself, that strength. I mean, I've only had I'd probably say maybe 10, what I would quote negative experiences, but even the negative ones are still exhilarating and still important. But when people can develop that self-awareness and that self-worth, to me personally, there's absolutely nothing out there to fear in that way. You can still use discernment. There's plenty of guides. There's plenty of entities that I've met, or maybe they appeared as something. And I say, I don't agree with that. I'm not gonna, I still use discernment and everything like that. But in terms of anything to really be afraid of, I don't think that. I think it has to do with your internal compass in that way. for sure.
Just wanted to ask you as well, how do you know the difference between your guide and another being? Because even if it's not your guide, I'm guessing they don't have to be bad per se. They could be still very loving. But how do you know the difference? How do you know they are your guide or not?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think I'm still learning that, to be honest with you. It's a growing experience. I work with a friend of mine. He's a very good dream analyst. His name is Michael Sheridan here in Seattle, and he's a friend of mine. And he, in the dream state, the guides will show up usually with symbols that will show you that they're guides. So if you're like in your backyard and there's like a garden project going on, and there's an authority figure there, somebody that says, I'm the manager, they're usually a guide. Somebody with a title. Oftentimes in my actual dreams, they'll kind of be standing up on a step that's actually elevated. And I'll think, wow, this guy's really tall. Guide. So those things can really help when you're just in a regular dream, to kind of go back and think, okay, because what guides say in regular dreams, from my experience, is infallible. So if they are a guide, it is true what they say. They'll usually give you a gift. They're gift givers in dreams. So I've been given weird things like an empty black duffel bag. Okay. But it's meant to realize, there's the symbol of the bag and how it's empty, how I don't have any baggage. Now in lucid states, I find it can be trickier. So, a lot of authors about OBE have done a lot of work about kind of declaring things, having confidence. And I do a lot of that. I just say, look, if you're not a guide, please go away, kind of a thing, and with a lot of authority. And from there, it's just about using my discernment. Yeah. So.
And I guess there's maybe a sense of familiarity. I've heard that sometimes people feel very familiar to the guides. So I don't know if that is your experience, but did you experience that?
Yes, for sure. I think there is. And I think too, when I go over there, I would say I don't have my full consciousness. I try to have my full consciousness. But when I have, maybe just a fraction of my consciousness, there is the sense of of a family. So I'll meet with people and it's just and I'll come back and take notes and think, I just remember seeing them and it was very comfortable, kind of a thing. So yes, exactly. They're the kind of conversations you have almost with friends.
That's lovely. Because I know a lot of people would love to reach out to their guides, but haven't quite worked out how. They're at the beginning stages, or maybe their guides have tried to reach out. And like you said, that beginning stage where it's scary because you're having to see people outside of how we usually meet people. And yeah, so now you've navigated that enough. Have there been any I heard you speaking about health issues. Have there ever been things that you have got help from your guides that have been life-changing on this side for you, that have literally changed the trajectory of how you would have seen yourself being able to deal with it without their help, their guidance, and tapping into that energy that you have?
Yeah, I mean, that is countless, to be honest with you. There are so many things that I've learned specifically about this realm, to be honest with you. The things that they want humans to understand about this realm. And I don't need to go into details about that, but it's been really eye-opening, the information they've given me. I mean, but even just as something as simple as I was very sick for a long time. I was very, very sick, and nobody knew what was wrong with me. I mean, my hair was coming out in chunks in the shower, and I was kind of facing this new life of having this weird autoimmune disease. And I just thought, well, I'm going to ask the guides. And it took me a couple weeks to get in there and really get them there. And finally, one of them showed up, and I just said, oh, finally you're here. Can you tell me what to do to make this go away? And he handed me a very small little white pillow, and it was sort of shaped kind of like what I would describe as kind of an amoeba. And in the state, I actually looked at him and looked at this thing, and I analyzed what it meant. And so I realized that this little white pillow was alive. And so when I came back, it was like I drew it down, and I said, and I knew that it was like I would take a little white pill. So it was like a pun on pill. And I was researching, this shape, and I found that it was the exact shape of what penicillin looks like under the microscope. And so I put this pillow that I'd drawn, and then I put this image of penicillin under the microscope, and I said, that's pretty straightforward. I got to take penicillin.
Wow.
But the thing is I had been quote unquote allergic to penicillin my entire life. I mean, so it was very hard to find a doctor to agree with me that, but I did. And I took penicillin for almost 2 months because I had a very severe bacterial infection that nobody had ever diagnosed. And it went away, and I was fine.
That is great.
So you say you were unwell for a long time, but then all of a sudden you decided to ask your guide. I just wanted to know what took you so long. Like, is there something, a belief that you were holding on to that made you not actually use your gift and actually ask your guide in the first place?
Well, I had quote unquote psoriasis my entire life. So for me, it was kind of like, oh, it's just getting worse, And so for me, and then it got to a point where I was like, I'm so bad off, I had patches on my neck and chest. So I think it was kind of that cognitive dissonance of like, oh, wait a minute, this isn't my normal little spots on my arms. This is like really serious, And so it took me a while to catch up to that.
Okay. So I'm guessing it's like sometimes we can feel so bad in our general life that we kind of like we get used to it, and then only if there's something like stronger than happened, then that's why we really react. Is that what it is?
Exactly. I really think it is. I think even there's so many, I mean, I've done this for so long, and there's even still times where something will happen and I'll still go into that mindset of, oh, it's okay. And it's like, wait a minute, Jamie, you've done this long enough. You can think outside the box and see it for what it is. But I think, I'm just kind of like, well, I have psoriasis. And it's like, wait a minute, come on. You can do something about this. You have access to these things. So.
Yeah, I think we've experienced the same thing as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was about to say.
Yeah. To say the least.
This is why I was asking you the question.
You kind of forget, and then you're like, oh, yeah. I think it's part of being here. You forget that you have access to this whole entire, like, all-knowing thing. And you kind of just think, well, let me go on Google first. And then
ask my doctor first.
If Google can't fix it, then where else can I go? Yeah. And then finally you're like, oh, hang on, I've got like the ultimate Google. Let me go.
That's amazing.
Let me go ask my guides real quick. They kind of know me more. And
you know what? It's very. It's wonderful because you actually were able to verify it, like compare the shape. Like it's amazing. Like it's not just something that we say and you can't really see. You actually somewhat were able to see it as well. So it's fantastic.
That was extremely practical.
Right, exactly. Life-changing, but definitely practical.
Yeah, because I know a lot of people's interpretation about this is that, oh my God, they're going to say spin around 3 times under a full moon and then, fling holy water on myself or whatever it is they think that these guides are going to ask you. And sometimes it's like, can you eat less cheese? Can you just stop the cheese?
Don't say that.
I know. And sometimes I don't want to ask in case they tell me something like that. And I'm like, no, not the cheese. And then next thing you know, I'm eating salad instead. And I'm just like, I should never have asked, but I do feel great.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? So yeah, I definitely agree with that one. Do you want to ask the next one? Because I know that was very poignant with you as well.
Yes. So as you know, we kind of resonated with one of your video about AIWS. And I just wanted you to actually explain what it was and what your whole experience was about that. And I know that's about your son as well. So I just wanted to know if it was possible for you to let us know a bit more about it. And also we can exchange our experience, because obviously we are familiar with that situation as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I've gotten a lot of people coming to me about that, and it's interesting. I had no idea what it was. This is kind of harkens back to what we just said. It's like my son at the age of 5, maybe 6, came into the bedroom and just started talking about, demons and portals, and he was not there at all. And it was very scary. And I've done this so long, but the first thing I thought was, well, this is like day one of my life as somebody with a son with schizophrenia. It's like, this is devastating. And it took him a couple hours to kind of come out of it. And I just thought, oh my gosh, what is happening? It was very, very scary for my husband and I. And when he came to, it was kind of like, okay. And it was related to the fever. He had a fever. And we didn't think much of it in that way. But since then, he has had this, what's called Alice in Wonderland syndrome, where he, at night, when he lays down, especially when he's sick, there is a depth perception issue going on where he calls it the big and the small. And most of the time it has to do with, like, I'll be talking to him in bed and he'll say, okay, Mom, you're like really far away right now, like really far away. And they theorize that Lewis Carroll had it as a child. Because of the, Alice in Wonderland, like in the cottage, pushing her leg through, kind of these, the little table with the bottle and that kind of thing. So we've been learning a lot about that, because he does have it regularly. And I'm learning more about how it really is about him tapping into the other side and trying to navigate that. So we're definitely not dismissing it. We're encouraging it. We've just found out within the last year that my daughter also has it. She did the same thing to me, had a fever, started talking about demons and portals and scared and everything. And it accumulated to one night where she was in bed sick, and I didn't think much of it. And I heard from her room, I heard a voice yell, take it down, take it down. And it was this male voice. And I jolt up and I run over to her room, and it's just quiet. Nothing's going on. And I'm looking around like, okay, what was that? And so I went back to bed, and about 10 minutes later, she came back and she had pulled all the stuff off of the walls in her room, the posters and everything, and she's carrying them to me. And she's like, tell him to stop telling me. I'm taking it down. I'm taking it down. And she piles all the posters on the bed, and she's like, tell him to stop yelling at me. So we obviously had both heard this male voice, like, take it down. And so, yeah, so I mean, it's been interesting to say the least. To do that, to kind of have these experiences with the kids in that way. My son is definitely not scared anymore, so that's really great. He can navigate it a lot better, and it's been really interesting that way. My daughter, I think, is still playing catch up a little bit. If she does get a fever, I do keep an eye on her, because it can be intense.
Yeah.
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 So yeah, for us, I mean, it was really familiar in the sense that I've experienced the same thing as well when I was a kid, and like you say, like nobody really speaks about it, so I didn't know what it was until obviously we saw your video, and it's an eye opener, and I think as well. I mean, without seeing the content you created about it, I started knowing that it's a bit more than just sort of more than a syndrome. It's something to see with the other side and certain abilities. And obviously, as a kid, it's very frightening because I was really, really scared. And my parents at the time, they didn't know how to deal with it. And what things that is really good is that you were able to actually hear the voices as well. So that's fantastic, because there's at least somebody where you can correlate, what's going on.
Yeah, that must have been really validating for her as well,
absolutely.
because she had someone outside hearing the same thing she was hearing. So
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
But I found out as well that AIWS, usually it's without voices. So it's funny that this comes and add on top of it as well. So it's definitely something that it's more than just an illness or something like that. So yeah, we wanted to talk about it because I think it's important, because I'm sure a lot of people are experiencing with the children similar things, or themselves maybe as well as an adult.
Have you asked your guides about this? Or because you kind of were a weird child yourself, have you just kind of like day to day just navigated as and when something comes up with your partner?
Yeah, I haven't really talked to them about that specifically with the kids. I do tend to do some do trance work as well. So like in the early morning hours, I'll just sort of go into that state and ask questions. And I did ask, I was trying to find a portal. This is a whole nother thing. And somebody just said, come on, it's down the hall, like duh. And so I often think about that in terms of like, okay, maybe there's something going on with the hallway and some portal. But the truth is that my daughter to this day is not scared of it at all. So there's really no reason for me to even worry about it or think about it. She turns all the lights out, keeps the closet wide open, has done since the day she was born, sees things at night, and it's kind of like, well,
Whatever.
So yeah, so I'm just like, okay, well, I know you're tapping into something, but we'll just see where it goes, I guess.
That is wonderful.
So have you got any advice for parents that are obviously experiencing with the children awakening symptoms, I guess we can say that? How do you deal with it when you're not necessarily awaken yourself, or because perhaps some people, they're aware of it, but it doesn't mean they've experienced some sort of actual symptoms of awakening or sort of things like that. So how do you deal with it, really?
Yeah, that's hard. I mean, especially because even somebody like me who's gone through so much, it's so easy to think you just want it to stop, because it's not pleasant for your children, or to sort of, kind of think, well, maybe we can suppress it, or it's got to go in this one box kind of a thing. And we don't have the tools, we don't have the language, we don't have the support really at all. This is sort of like navigating uncharted territory. So I think for me personally, my advice would be, and I think too for adults as well. I mean, I know myself, I've had a number of experiences where I've actually thought, wow, I might be losing it here. And it's very scary. It can be very scary. But it was important to go through it. And so there is that sense of just kind of allowing, and as long as you have your center to you, that strength of center, and having support around you in that way, I think is important. I've done a number of them alone. It wasn't fun, but I really relied on, I knew who I was, and I knew that I would be okay, kind of a thing. But yeah, that's very difficult. I can't imagine. And then when you're small and they're your kids, you just want to protect them from anything.
Yeah, absolutely.
It can be very challenging. But I think it's important to listen. Obviously, listen, and really keep an open mind. Always keep an open mind. Yeah.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic advice, because I know not every parent's on the journey yet, but their introduction to the journey is their child going through something like this. So I can understand if we're still, running to the doctors, running to Google, just totally forgetting about some of the abilities that we have access to. I can see why somebody who hasn't experienced that yet would maybe turn to a fearful outcome first. I just thought that you would kind of like be a voice of comfort for them, because I know that even though this is something that we've dealt with for years, and even though we both were children of this, to hear that somebody else had gone through it and had experienced it was in itself a comfort. So it's like, okay, so I'm not all alone in this. This is not just something I kind of, because a lot of the times with being here in this realm, you could say, okay, I dreamed it up, or it's your imagination. A lot of things are kind of brushed under the carpet or just shooed away as trivia or madness, but it's not. So I really wanted for the community to hear your take on that as well. Yeah. So thanks for that. Yeah, thanks
absolutely.
for that. Yeah.
Yeah, having support
can be helpful.
Oh, yeah.
A lot.
Surrounding yourself with people that at least can validate it is huge. I mean, in all these fields. I mean, even in the beginning, I mean, I learned quite quickly that, to kind of keep my mouth shut about most things, to be honest with you. But when you do when you do find somebody that just says, "Oh no, I get it," I get it, and I'm experiencing it, it's just like, oh,
yeah,
yeah.
That was literally us with you.
Yeah. Do you know what it is? I think you're doing a wonderful work and wonderful videos, just like sharing these experiences. Because even for me, when I saw the content of that video, I was like, wow. Okay. I was listening carefully, all the details, what you were saying, and trying to see if myself, and I'm a grown man, so you see, I was just not because I'm scared, because I'm obviously not scared anymore, but more to see like, okay, well, that is true, and I didn't experience that, and then look it up. And when I started looking into it, I realized that, because you also say that it started by a fever, but my one didn't start by a fever. It just started overnight, and that was it. So there's so many different scenarios, and sharing all of these experiences allow the community to kind of it's like a sense of identity, to be able to say to themselves, oh, this is my story, and feel much better. So that's a blessing now that we can actually exchange these informations.
Yeah,
and
it's wonderful.
I'm really, really happy for that.
Yeah, me too. I wanted to ask, have any of these experiences with your travels, your lucid dreaming, all of these things, even trance state meditation, the whole globality of it, has it changed the way that you have relationships with people in your waking life? Your loving relationships, you mentioned you have a husband, you mentioned you have children. Has it changed the way you parent? Has it changed the way you love? Has it shaped that? And if so, how?
Yeah, definitely. I think early on, it was more about kind of shock and also excitement. I wanted to share it with a lot of people because the truth is that when you do this, it's one thing to hear, you don't die, you just go on. But it's quite another thing to experience it and to embody it and to know it, and so that can change people. I remember one time I met this young man when I was living somewhere. I used to try to get people together to talk about lucid dreams in wherever city I was living. And this one guy sat down, he's like, "Do you not fear death?" And I said, "No, because once you experience it, it's like, why would I fear that?" So yeah, and I think too, there is this sense of once you kind of see the other side and, talk to guides and realize how powerful you are, and you kind of have a more global, big picture. And so in a lot of ways, I see my family almost as kind of partners in this life, as opposed to more of a hierarchy. To be honest, there's a learning in terms of, I realize that we've been before, we're going to be after. So I I learn from them all the time. I think too, there's a sense of compassion too for other people, because when you realize like what you really are, that translates into everyday life so easily, excuse me, sorry. But yeah, I think that I hope that answers that.
You can have a break and have a little water.
Oh my God,
you can
sorry.
have a water break. It's okay. I need one myself.
Yeah, you You did answer it very well.
Oh,
Yeah, because it's also sometimes difficult when you are. I'm going to talk in terms of level. So when you are awakened to a certain level, let's say, it's difficult sometimes to still connect with some family members, and it's not to say that. You can't keep them around you, but it can be challenging, specifically when you want to speak about certain issues where they may not understand or think you've gone crazy. So, how to deal with that? It's so important to hear different perspectives from different people. So that's why you giving us that perspective. I think it's extremely helpful because I feel blessed because my wife. She actually believed in the same thing, and so even if when I first shared my experiences, she wasn't like, "What are you talking about?" She wasn't doing any of this, so that was very easy for me. Which I'm thinking like, "Oh, great," but I know it's not the case for everyone. So yeah,
yes, and in fact, it's not the case for me. My husband does not have any interest or belief in this at all. To be honest with you, we have a great relationship, but he's very kind of practical person, but I will tell you that he believes and trusts me. So he has faith in me. And so when I tell him something and I say, look, this is what it's really like, and we maybe have a little bit of a disagreement, he has respect for me. And so we have a good rapport that way. But it was difficult, especially in the beginning. It's funny. I actually, I used to say, I'm going to go take a nap. But really, just to kind of keep it on the down low that what I was really doing.
Yeah.
And then finally it was like, well, you're going to practice lucid dreaming today? Kind of, get your act together kind of a thing. And it's like, oh, we've kind of come a long way where he's getting the fire under me to get going, So
that is wonderfully supportive.
I guess over time also, I mean, even if you don't really believe in it, you kind of see few things that are different. And then I'm guessing you start probably, even if it's a little bit, start believing it. I believe that, it's we influence each other at the end of the day. So I'm sure that, after a while, I mean, when you were able to cure yourself from the issue you had, that must be something. Even if you don't believe in it, it's like, how?
Maybe he's experiencing it, but experiencing it through you.
Yeah, a different way. It's just a form probably of waking up to it as well.
Yeah. It's wonderful.
For sure. Yeah.
Because we found with parenting now that's changed a lot. Our oldest is 15. Our youngest is 1.5. So
oh my goodness.
There's a lot of change happening. I'm no longer 25 anymore. So there's a whole load with that going on, let alone the fact that I've been out of body several times since that I hadn't experienced when I first had my daughter. And I know that when we first met each other, like I'd already been lucid dreaming and doing whatever, but it was never at the level once we had Grace. It wasn't nothing like that.
No, it wasn't there.
But it has changed how we parent a lot. Like I'm aware that, like you said, there's very little hierarchy here, and I think there's an illusion of hierarchy here. Right. It is an illusion, especially with our third one. She is her own person. She knows a lot of things. For example, she came and she said to me, maybe she was 2.5. Well, she was very talkative, very young. Maybe 2.5, 3 years old. And she just came to me and she was like, Mummy, last time I was your mummy, but this time you're my mummy, so you have to take care of me, all right? And I was like, all right. And she was like, good. And then she just hopped off my lap and just walked off. Like, that's it. I got her this time. I was like, I can only imagine. I must have been a terrible child. And she was like, right. Watch next time. So I go easy with her in respect to the fact that she used to be my mum. And she's cool, she's all right. But I was always aware that my children were people who I had to get to know,
Right.
rather than my child and my. It was like, okay, I don't know you, you don't know me, but I promise you I'll look after you. And it's like, we'll see about that. Okay. But I will be grading you. And it's that type of relationship. Like, so it's wonderful, but it's been very freeing. I know that a lot of people's belief about that type of thing is like based on what they've learnt before. Is there any, like if you had a certain upbringing or if any religious beliefs, it kind of does shape what type of parent you are. Have you found over the years any beliefs that you have changed? Any, happenings that have shown you, maybe we'll try this way instead. It's kind of like works more for us, that may be seen out of the normality of what people may think.
Yeah, I was raised in a very strong, like, Christian family. So for me, unraveling that, but I think unraveling that for me wasn't necessarily as difficult as most people, because I was like the kid in the class that was like, wait, what about this? Kind of always sort of just like, wait, what? So when I kind of got that unraveled in me, but I did, I think it's interesting because we kind of put ourselves in boxes. It was like, okay, well, if I'm not that, I've got to be something else. And I think that over the years, what I've just become is sort of box free, to be honest with you. I try to teach my kids to be box free. It's like, how do you describe like your experience? Well, it's based on experience, and it's based on curiosity, and it's based on love and compassion for other people. I think that a lot of us are here to help other people, point blank at the end of the day. There is definitely something to be done with waking people up to what's going on. That has to happen. I mean, my own wake up process was not pretty, but I did it, and I'm better for it in that way. So I think the idea of these kind of belief systems can be very, very tricky. Undoing them can be incredibly painful, incredibly hard, and not fun. But nonetheless, it should be done.
You go on?
Yeah, I was just.
I was interested about something else.
Yeah, I actually wanted to hear your perspective, and I'm sure a lot of people, after listening that video, going to want to hear your perspective on life. So, what's the meaning of life? I mean, it's a very simple question, but I think it helped to put some sort of intellectual structure to it for people. and what are we here to do, really? I mean, what is your perspective on that?
Though you've just touched on that, but yeah.
Just to sum it, what are your views?
Just your opinion. It doesn't have to be anything.
Okay, not put on paper.
You don't have to write any, and you can wake up tomorrow morning and be like, I don't even believe that anymore. Like, you're box free. You're box free. Go on.
Okay, on that note,
it's individual. I mean, it's an individual experience, obviously, to you. So we just want to have different perspectives. One is not more important than the other. It's just really freely how do you see life, and yeah.
I think for me personally, a lot of my awakening lately has been unraveling, like, kind of like the deception of things, the lies. So, and it's not fun or pretty to have to do that, but it's important. I think that in terms of a meaning of life, I think I personally always come back on the fact that our brain and our mind is something that is very powerful. Our mind, kind of the mental space that exists kind of somewhere else, is a creative tool. I think that it's pretty apparent that we've been numbed down in that way. Like, we're not, that to me is fairly obvious. So So there's a lot of implications for all of that.
Yeah.
In terms of why we're here, what the purpose is, you know, full pendulum the other way. I do believe in the little moments of everyday life that are just, you can have connections with other people. There can be magic and power in every single moment. And that can change reality in an instant. I think there's a lot going on. I think we don't all understand all of it, to be honest with you. I don't know if that answers that. That's pretty convoluted, but that's sort of the framework that I've come up with for myself.
It's perfect.
It's your perspective. That's exactly what
There
I
we go.
wanted.
Unrehearsed.
Thank you. Thank you for the answer. That's great.
And I also wanted to know, what was your perspective on what people are now deeming to be an awakening? Now, I know it could be seen in many different ways, but do you, for somebody who's going into it now, for somebody who's just stumbling upon this type of information, is your belief that it has to be something that is painful, even though that may have been part of what your experience was? I know for me, part of mine was extremely challenging. Or would you say that it's still looking back, would you say that that's a choice and you can choose to experience it differently, but it's just part and parcel of it? What is your perspective on that side of the awakening? Because I know a lot of people feel like, I'd like to, but it sounds like hard work. It sounds like struggle, and I don't feel like struggle right now. So what would you say to someone like that?
Well, at the end of the day, it's worth it. I don't know if it necessarily needs to be painful. Especially having children now, I can see in my own kids that they are more open than I definitely was at their age. The things that they think and say, and even their friends, it's remarkable. They question everything, and it's almost like this new generation is. I was always the one that was reading like about the Bermuda Triangle and about, ghosts and like, all of that. Whereas they're questioning reality. I mean, my son and his friends actually talk about like, dimensions and, and I think a lot of this kind of sci-fi new kind of content and things like that really have opened their minds. I mean, my son is trying to lucid dream and he's like, I'm going to figure out time travel. I'm like, okay, like, cool. So I think in a lot of ways for moving forward, it can be a lot easier. I hope that I'm kind of the last generation or gasp of people that were so immersed in the lies and the deception that kind of had to crack open a little bit there,
Yeah.
a little rough landing. But yeah, so I would think that it could be easy if you kind of have an open mind in that way. Yeah.
Wonderful. I think that would, well, definitely for the younger, like you said, they've just come here different. That's for sure. But I think even for people who are in our generation and feel like, I haven't done this yet and it just feels like I'm going to have to unpick too much, to hear that it is worth it on the other side, like it's worth it. And I do second that it is worth it. I think that would be a great comfort to them as well. Waking people up just to that fact that it is worth it is a huge thing. So really thanks for that. Yeah, really.
Yeah, I think there is. I mean, I went my entire life with this gnawing sense of uncomfortableness, not knowing, confused. And that's not a really great way to live, to be honest with you, waking up every day kind of like, what it's something, something. And now I don't. I mean, I wake up and I'm like, I understand now. Like, there's a great peace that comes with that. I've had I would call two awakenings. And the second one, after the dust settled, I thought, oh, finally, finally I get it, a little bit better. I feel a lot more peaceful and a lot more confident to step forward into the world and say, this is kind of the way it is. And, it's just a lot more confidence. Yeah. So I definitely recommend it.
Okay, that's wonderful. Now, how we met you was through your YouTube channel. Have you got anything going on with your channel? And could you give our community where to reach you, or if you want to be reached, or where they can see your content or reach out to you in any way?
Yeah, I always love to hear from people. So I would love to talk to anyone. I've met so many people through YouTube that have amazing stories and just so inspiring and incredible. So yeah, my YouTube is under my full name, Jaime Dyson. I haven't made a whole lot of contact within the last 6 months, but it's not for lack of wanting to. It's just more 2 middle school children and Little League baseball and coming home at 10 at night and waking up at 6 kind of a thing. So yeah, so I'm definitely going to get back out there and make contact. I have a list of things that I work on in that state. So I'm always up to something. So
Lovely, lovely. This has been a wonderful conversation.
Yes.
I'm sure we'll speak again, because you know how awakenings are. You keep on expanding, you keep on finding out more. If you have more encounters, if more things happen, when more things happen, it's inevitable. We'd love to have you back on at some point. And thank you so much for being here. And it has been such a treat. So thank you so much.
Thank you very
thank
much.
you so much. Thank you so much for having me. It was great.
All right. We're going to say our goodbyes for the crowd. So everybody who's watching, please share, like, and subscribe. And we'll see you next time.
Ciao.
Ciao.